coming into here already. So we just had a really good call with Rob Walling. It just like went with 1 minute to go to the end, which is why I'm sort of like bang on time. But
that's cool.
Yeah, it looks like no technical issues so far. I'm just going to jump straight into an intro. Actually, just before I do the intro, are you happy to talk for a few minutes about the approach we use for marketing the 7-Day Startup and then just do Q&A?
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Right. So Tom reached out to me when I was thinking about launching the 7-Day Startup book. And I like to say that Tom made me famous because I was thinking of just putting the book up on my website. And he said, no, if you're going to release a book, you really should probably do it properly and follow a proper process with Amazon. And I literally knew nothing about book marketing or Amazon Kindle Direct, KDP. I didn't know anything about like ambassador groups, stuff like that. And Tom just ran this whole thing for me, turned the book into a bestseller. And as you can see, everything that's happened since has been quite epic. So, yeah, Tom's a gun. I was just reading your post last night about the year you had last year, Tom, and the amount of projects you've been involved with that have done amazingly well is pretty freaking staggering, I have to say. So welcome to the call.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.
So the topic is about book marketing, but I do know, I was just saying on Snapchat this morning, like the approach you take for book marketing is got so much in common with the approach you take for, like a crowdfunding campaign or other types of marketing, that it almost is like this kind of approach that we use for 7-Day Startup, for example, and however you've iterated it since, is almost like a generic approach you can take for launching something. So if you just want to spend a few minutes going through the overall what we did or what you do now, because you've probably made some changes, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, totally. I think that's an awesome place to start. I'm actually going to pull up my notes as a reference point to give you guys kind of a structure. I always find that it's most useful to make it as applicable as possible and as tangible for you guys. So what I'll do is quick background on me, then I'll go into kind of maybe 12 to 14 steps that we went through with Dan's launch, and that it actually hasn't changed much since that, Dan, to be honest with you. It's actually we've just refined it, and it's which is pretty cool to know that there's kind of a fundamental truth, I think, to any type of product launch, whether it's book or anything else. Books are unique in their own way, but we can talk about that as well in the Q&A. So my background, like Dan said, I do book publishing. I'd originally done book publishing. Actually, before that, I was in the Army, spent about 5 years active duty. And then in my last year, I was like, I need to do something else other than this. So I figured, hey, I'll start something online, and basically hustled that for like a year while I was still in the Army. And then when I got out, I made a little money from like selling some of my own ebooks, and decided, okay, I'm going to see if I can do this for real, and started publishing my own stuff, started doing all that kind of, platform building stuff that everybody talks about. Then I decided, you know what, this is kind of going slow. I can help other people probably do this better than I can do it myself. So I started publishing people. And Dan was the first guinea pig for when we switched from publishing to also doing these services where we did the marketing and the launch of these products. And again, the 7-Day Startup, awesome book. If you guys don't have it, check it out. You can get it in Vietnam as well, from what I'm hearing.
True. In Vietnamese,
yes.
Yep.
Vietnamese. And yeah, so it's on Vietnam bookshelves, which is awesome. And so we went through this process to get this book out there. And I'll go through the overarching kind of step-by-step stuff. I'll keep it super brief. And then what I'll do is I'll hand it off to you, Dan, or Q&A to all you guys out there if you want to ask questions about any aspect of these things, because we can go into as much depth or as little depth as you guys want, or we can go to something else. And then in the meantime, too, while you guys are here, definitely give me some 2 hands like this as much as possible in the corner, and Dan, too. And then also make sure you tweet. So tell a little bird and post it on Facebook, and let's support Dan and the 7-Day Startup. Okay, so share.
That's why I get marketing. That's why I get marketing guys on my blabs. I don't have to do any work at all.
that's it. Cool. So guys, here's the deal. Like we went through basically, I'll say 14 steps. So number 1, we started with what I call kind of a book launch sequence working document, or I call it a book marketing canvas now. Kind of, there's 2 separate files, two separate items, and the book canvas is something I adapted from Ash Maurya, who wrote Running Lean, and he's big in the startup space. And it's basically a one-page business model for a business, right? And it was, who was it? It was Todd Satterson of 800 CEO Read, who once said, every book is a startup. And I took that to heart, and I thought that every book should have a business plan then. So it basically starts with that business plan. You kind of identify the main aspects. Who's the target audience? How are you going to reach them? And so on and so forth. The second thing there, and this is arguably one of the most important pieces, is identifying then, step 2 is identifying the key players, who's involved. So if you have a publisher, if you have an editor, if you have somebody who's doing marketing for you, if you have a Facebook ads person, make sure everybody's who's involved is aware of it, and you've designated what their tasks are, what their responsibilities are. From there, you want to make sure you actually have a due date set. So a lot of people will just let that slide by, but if you don't lock down the date, you're just never gonna ship. So set a date, even if you're uncertain about it, because you'll find that, yeah, the deadline might hurt, but you'll get it out, and that's what matters. Beyond that, so step 4 then is determining your goals. So with Dan, this was kind of one of the first conversations we had, was what did he want to do with this? And he was like, I'm just going to give this away for free, and you're not going to change my mind. So I was like, okay, fine, but maybe we can give it away free in a more strategic way. So while Dan, I wasn't able to get Dan to sell it like for a fee at the, or for I wasn't able to put a price on it with Dan, but we went through Amazon, we did KDP Select, and we gave it away for free for 5 days. And we ended up doing, I think, over 10,000 sales in that week, and that was pretty cool. So that's how we did it. But Dan's goal was just getting it out there free, and so that was awesome, because when you set the goal and you're clear about it, you can then figure out what's the best way to actually release this thing. How can we get this out there into the world? Step 5, I like to centralize all materials for the book. So whatever project you're working on, you can do it in Google Drive. Have a folder where you just have everything that you're going to use for marketing. Have a little subfolder for social media. Have a subfolder for your images. Have a subfolder for everything relevant. So you can reach in there, grab it, and use it. And the good part about doing this early is you can develop a lot of your swipe file content, your email marketing, your social media content, and you can get that stuff done early, because when the launch time comes, you don't have time to actually create anything. You just have to manage the interactions you're having with people. You're just going to be encouraging, having conversations and stuff like that. You're going to get a lot of media exposure. So you won't have time to actually really craft anything. So you want to do as much of that beforehand as possible. And then there's the next 3 steps. Steps 6, 7, and 8 are kind of all lumped together. It's creating an early notification list, creating an ambassador group, and creating what I call like an influencer circle or influencers list. And the early notification list is nothing more than anybody who wants to know about your book. So for Dan, it was putting up a splash page on his website that said, hey, the 7-Day Startup is coming out. I think you had the cover design ready. So you had the cover design on the page, and he said, sign up and you'll get your copy free. And what did you end up getting? You probably got a few hundred, if not over 1,000 people sign up for that, right, Dan?
Yeah, I can't actually remember, but I've used this exact approach for the Black Ops Kickstarter. Possible. I've used it for Content Machine launch, and every time I've used it, I've got more and more people to it. And the thing, so I guess the point of that is like, you'll get some people who just want to be notified, but out of those people that want to be notified, this is my biggest lesson for the whole thing, is that you'll get a small group of those people who want to do a lot more than just know that when the book's going to come out. And that's the ambassador group. And that just turns into an absolute weapon for our crowdfunding campaign, for the book, for everything I've launched with that model. That ambassador group has turned into an absolute weapon. And the 7-Day Startup one is actually the Facebook group you guys are in at the moment. So that group now that has 5,500 members is the ambassador group that Tom created as part of this process.
And I see some people asking what the steps were. So step 5, what I'll do is I'll copy paste this in at the end. I'll see how big a message I can do in Blab, so you guys have it. But step 5 was centralizing all your materials. Then it was creating an early notification list, which feeds into, so that was step 6. Step 7 was create an ambassador group. So that's what Dan just said. Once you have people signed up to let them know, hey, my book's coming out, I want to know when the 7-Day Startup comes out. What Dan just said, and this is true of any product you're launching, of anything you're doing, I swear there's going to be 1 to 3% of your audience that are just jazzed about whatever it is, I'm going to buy it. I mean, I tried to order beer from Dan, even though he's in Australia and he couldn't ship to the States. But so that's what I'm saying. You're going to have very big fans, and it doesn't matter what you do. And so the key is, how do you leverage those big fans into something more than just waiting for your book? Create an ambassador group or a launch team or a street team. There's a lot of different names for it. These people are basically, if we're talking about books, they're basically saying, I want to be a part of this launch. I'm willing to read the book early, and I'm willing to leave a review early when it comes out, when the time comes. and I want to share it when it comes out. And that's it. That's the only exchange you're getting. And then in exchange, what they get is usually a free copy of the book because they need to read it early, and then access to you. So we built that group up. I want to say that like 300 to 500 people for Dan's for the 7-Day Startup. And I think that has a lot to do with the success and the momentum that it's carried forward ever since. Yeah, I think. I don't know what your thought is on that, Dan.
Yeah, and as well as the other ones I've done since as well. We'll talk about the Black Ops crowdfunding thing this afternoon, but every time I do it, I get nervous that there's not going to be those people in my audience, especially for Black Ops. We don't have a big audience, but we've got a very tight niche that we're in the craft beer space. So I was sort of thinking like, is this ambassador thing going to work? Is the Thunderclap thing going to work? And it worked better than it's worked, whenever I've done it. So, every time I think it's only going to work for online marketing or whatever, I try it and it just works better than I expect.
Yep. So then after that point, we put together our list of people who want the product or want the book early. Then from that group, we pull out a small percentage of them who said, not only do I want the book, I want it early, I want to read it, I want to review it, I want to share it. Awesome. And you'll see this with any bestseller campaign. For New York Times, Wall Street Journal, they all have the same thing. They all do this. But you don't have to be a New York Times or Wall Street Journal type. You don't need to be going for those goals to use the same strategy and get great results. Somebody had asked, I think it was Alan, where's the best place to manage those people? I think what we did for the 7-Day Startup, and we've continued to use it for every launch since, is capture their email address so you have an easy way to reach out to them, and then send them to a Facebook group so people can just interact. But you could also do it in Slack. I haven't tried that out yet, but as that's becoming more and more popular, I just want to meet people where they're at, and the majority of people happen to be on Facebook.
The Facebook thing works so well that just a simple autoresponder where, like, when they sign up to be notified, they get another option to be like an ambassador or to go into the Facebook group, and a few percent of those take that option. They go straight in there. They get notifications. They get really excited for the few weeks around the launch because it's all new. And everyone's on Facebook. I've tried, because in my pro group, I've got a Facebook group and a Slack group. And the Facebook group is still more active because people are just there and they see the notifications and it's on their mobile. They don't have to log in, and everyone knows how to use it. Everyone's using it. So I think it's still the best place you can do a group like that.
Yep. So now on to step 8. And this is kind of, I think, what at the end of the day, like, it's one of the unfair advantages some people have to a degree. But with a good book and a good message or a good product, you can make this happen. So step 8 is actually building your influencer circle. So if you have an established platform, so I will say at the time, Dan, like I knew you through WP Curve, but I didn't really know who Dan Norris was, to be honest with you. And I think that was probably the case for a lot of people. They kind of knew about WP Curve, but they didn't really know who you were. And what was interesting, I think, about that is I think it proves the point that you don't need to have a huge established personal brand to build a good influencers circle. You had just done the work. You'd created a good book, and we were able to put that into a story and present that to people. What happened was we were able to get arguably hundreds, if not definitely in a good, tens, 50s, and probably 50 to 100 people, if not more, to basically commit to supporting the campaign in some way, shape, or form, which was either doing a podcast with Dan about it, which was doing a written review, which was sharing the book, social media. That probably has the least amount of weight. We try to go to the other things first, but the point is, people were willing to sign up and say, yeah, I'll share that. Or yeah, I want Dan on my podcast to talk about this. And what's cool is that you do that as much as possible to build up to the launch and get them to ideally go live in and around like the first week of launch. That's always ideal for a big launch. But the cool part is, even if they don't go live at launch, if you're worried about that, if they go live a few weeks after, or a few months after, if you have an evergreen type book that doesn't require like it to be, if it's something that can be around for a while, which I think, the 7-Day Startup is a great example of a book that will be around for a while. It's honestly, I see this as like the next 4-hour work week, honestly, with the way it's picking up steam and continuing to sell. What's interesting about that is it's okay if the promotion and marketing keeps happening, because it's going to keep driving new sales to you. And case in point, Dan, I think you've done over 30,000 sales of this book? Yeah,
including the first 10,000 free, it's over 30,000, yeah.
Which is pretty remarkable. The free is remarkable too. I mean, pushing that money, it's just that but paid for sure. And very few books break 10,000 sold copies in their lifetime.
Yeah, that also doesn't include that the international translation's a really interesting one. I don't know if people are interested in hearing about that, but when people buy an international translation of it, it goes through the publishers. So they're effectively buying, like the deal we did with China, they're buying 6,000 copies. So I don't count any of those in those numbers. So it could end up getting out to, tens and tens of thousands of people that I wouldn't even necessarily sort of count. So it's pretty crazy, but yeah.
Yeah. And so one person said, I find that people tend to follow big names. It's just how it works. Correct. So now your job is, if you're not a big name, leverage the big names. How can you leverage the big names then for yourself? That's the question. Everybody, I feel like this is always the challenge I get from people. It's like, well, I'm not so-and-so. I don't have their platform.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, it's not about that. If you have a good story and you have a good, and again, you're assuming you're not completely antisocial. I'll say this, give credit to Dan. He's on Facebook nonstop. I don't know how he runs businesses, but he's always engaging people and responding to people. And it's like, no wonder he gets a response he does, I think, from – I'm not surprised the response you get, Dan, from your audience, because you're personable. But I think that's the deal. You're personable. You have a good book, good product. And through that, we were able to connect with people who have big audiences. Those are the people most people follow, right? And we were able to get them to share the book. And that's bottom line, is all you need, all you want to happen is – and of course, it's not – I'll say this as a caveat. You want to start building those relationships long before you need them. So
Absolutely.
So as much as you can support these people that you eventually would like to ask a favor of, do what you can for them. Share their campaigns, support their launches, buy their products if you have to, or if you want to. I think you should in most cases, assuming they're, it's easy to buy. Anytime somebody comes out with a book and you'd like to get to know that person, buy that book. It's $10 less.
Yep.
Those are the kind of things that are going to show. Then when you talk to that person, you can say, hey, big fan, bought your stuff, shared it here, wrote about it on my blog. And here's my question for you. And all of a sudden that person's going to listen to you. And it's not rocket science, but it does take you being kind of forward thinking about it. You need to think about these relationships before you need them. So I'll get off my high horse there.
No, I think that's so important. I see some people do that really well, and they end up, you see them sort of working for a few years on, getting to know people, and they're not sort of like doing anything massive themselves. And then a few years later, you see them just blowing stuff up, and all the influencers are sharing their stuff because they've just put in that work. And a lot of us in this online marketing sort of online entrepreneurship world are all doing the same thing. We're just creating stuff. We're trying to get it out into the world, and we're looking for support from other people who do it. So, if you can support other people and do exactly what you said and do it over a long period of time, be as generous and as accessible as you can, then it ends up coming back to you.
Agreed, 100%. So then we move on to step 9, which is identifying alternative marketing channels. So everybody goes the traditional route with most things. So I'm going to put my book on Amazon, and that's it. That's a good start, but that's what everybody does. That's the minimum threshold of you putting it on a platform. Or I'm going to use social media. Okay, minimum threshold. Everybody's doing it. So beyond the blatantly obvious places where people can potentially find your book, which is social media and the platform where you're going to be selling it, like Amazon, then we need to think out, how else do we get this book out to people? Alternative marketing channels. So things like that. That's where you get really clever and we're really creative. So we did a Thunderclap campaign for you, Dan. I know you've done that since multiple times and had great success getting over a million reach through social media channels. If you guys don't know, it's called thunderclap.it or something like that, I think.
Yeah, I'll put in the campaign. I've done it for the 7-Day Startup Challenge. I've done it for Content Machine and the Black Ops Possible campaign.
Yep.
I'll put the Content Machine one in there because that was the biggest in terms of the actual number of people who supported. I think we got to 450 supporters or something like that. It's also, just a really easy. What's that?
Also a good book.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's just an easy, like really low friction way for people to support you. Oh, nice. Sorry. Yeah, that's the Thunderclap. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's one example. Other examples, it's things like, here's an example, which may get played out very soon here. Product Hunt. Product Hunt just rolled out a book section. That's a great chance to leverage a new but very popular platform to get legs for your book. Whether it's too late to leverage that, it might be, I don't know. But I think there's still, here's the deal. Even if a platform's been used once for something else and great success, you can usually use it again and again. Product Hunt, as an example, will have many, many years left in it to give steam to a new book. But you got to think through, how do I actually share that on Product Hunt without being a spammer? Those are the things you got to think through too. It's not just about finding a place and then placing your book there. It's saying, here's a place I would like to market. What do I need to know about this marketplace or this platform? Who do I need to connect with? And how do I pay that forward before I start posting my own stuff? So again, that's where the strategy comes in. It's not obvious, but it's not supposed to be. So you want to start thinking about those things. Then we want to, go into step 10, which is build your sales page or high converting sales page, which is fairly basic. I think, actually, Dan, you could probably type in your book sales page so people can see it. I think it's a great example of, and either for Content Machine or 7-Day Startup, it's a great example of a simple sales page. It's straight to the point, but it follows like certain key elements. So I won't go into that unless people want to talk about sales pages.
Yeah, it was just done in optimized press. I think I talked about that on the last call. It's really easy plug-in to use to build really nice looking customized sales pages pretty quickly.
Okay, and Rob said not too late on Product Hunt. You need to add value to the Product Hunt community. Agreed, right? So it's totally not too late for those kind of community, but you need to add value first. How do you come in there non-spammy? How do you build relationships with whoever is involved in it and kind of become part of the community? That's ultimately where people have great success in these platforms. They've been there for a while, is usually the case. Yeah. And then we get into step 11, which is get your book ready for distribution. So, getting it all prepped. There's a lot of work that goes into that. Don't leave it to the last second. Files for Kindle, for PDF, whether you're doing paperback or hardcover. The story changes. So it depends on what format you need and where you're selling it. And then this doesn't even include if you're selling at Barnes & Noble or the iBookstore and stuff like that, which are all great places to sell. But you'll need most of them have unique formats. So you need to be aware of that, and either willing to put in the time to learn those platforms to format it right, or my recommendation, throw a few $100s into it. You can get great designers for relatively cheap, around $1,000 to format these things. So don't skimp on design elements, in my opinion. Go where it's worth putting your money, which is good design, good cover, good formatter and stuff like that, good editor. It's worth if you think the book's worthwhile, it's worth putting the money into those things. And then we basically go into launch, where we step 12, 13, 14. Step 12, notifying the ambassadors and influencers. So this is right before we go live. Then step 13, final prep and pre-launch marketing. So anything that we need to we want to hit on launch day. And then, of course, launch. And so these things kind of overlap. So we want to, and I'll be brief with this and we go into Q&A. Ambassador group, that really essential group we talked about, they're the first people you want to notify about the book being live. This is whether you're doing it on Amazon or anywhere. And here's the reason for Amazon in particular. If they are able to see the book first and download it first and leave the first reviews, those reviews are most likely to get upvoted in Amazon. And when I come to a sales page on Amazon and I scroll down, I see the description, which is only a few sentences unless you extend it, and then the editorial reviews, which is kind of a trade secret. Not really. I mean, it's just a great way to get extra room in there that you get to put in. After that, then it goes to kind of your ranking, and then it goes into reviews of users. And bottom line is there's going to be 3 to 5 or something like that in Amazon that are going to be visible. So you want to make sure that the best reviews are visible first. You want to encourage your ambassadors to upvote each other's reviews too, within, ethically, if they found the review helpful. And what happens is you now have this great review. People have upvoted it, so it's going to get higher. And it just sets you up for success as you share the book with other places, because then they see, oh, wow, there's 10 reviews, 30 reviews, 50 reviews, and they're high, and people really like this book. And that's going to, of course, lead indirectly to more sales. So that's why that's essential. And then ultimately,
it helps the ranking as well, right?
It does, and it helps the ranking indirectly. That's what I always say, because number one, there's no way to know for sure how Amazon's algorithms actually work. You just kind of best guess based on experience. And I will say this, that I know their algorithm is basically 100% based on sales and sales conversion rates. So, and then in conjunction with kind of keywords. So reviews will usually lead to more sales. Good reviews usually lead to more sales. So there's generally a correlation, but I don't think it's a causation. But that's just my hypothesis. So, but the point is, it doesn't hurt. So that's it.
It's a proof thing on the page either way. You go to a page and you see a bunch of reviews. It proves to you that it's a legit book, as opposed to going on and just having nothing on there. So it's like adding testimonials to your website. It's just something that you should be doing every time you put up a sales page.
Yep. And then ultimately after that, it's how do you, that's the launch. And then you get as many people promoted as possible, the influencers, your early notification list, you release it to them. And you just create this kind of like tsunami effect of all these things going live. Like the thunderclap goes live, this maybe the second or third day. Maybe you have the product hunt placement go live the fourth day. On the fifth day, maybe you do a Reddit AMA. On the sixth day, maybe you do something else. And I know we're talking nonfiction because we're talking about the 7-day startup, but believe it or not, even if you're doing fiction, guys, there are a lot of the same techniques that we used here. So it's not relegated to nonfiction. Although those are, that's kind of what I work with, and that's what, Dan's a nonfiction author, so that's kind of what we're talking about there. Just FYI.
Yep.
And that's it.
All right, very good. Well, we've got a bunch of questions. If people want to come on the call, then now's the time to call in. But I like this question from Liam, so let's have a crack at that one. I'll just bring it up on the main screen if you can see it.
Yep. Okay. What have been the main differences, pros and cons with Dan's free paid launch for 7-day startup versus your other clients who use paid pre-orders? Good question. So ultimately, it depends. The results have been all over the board. Most recently, we did a crowdfunding campaign for John Lee Dumas's The Freedom Journal, and we've raised over $300,000 so far. And there's a lot of variables in place here that are. It's kind of comparing apples to oranges, but that's an example of his goal. John had a large platform, and he basically said he could fund the book himself. He didn't need Kickstarter. He was very outward about that. But he chose to do Kickstarter to basically catalyze his audience and generate revenue straight away from the book. So it's just different strategies. As far as Amazon type launches, Dan's cool because he discloses a lot of those numbers. So I can't give you specific numbers from other people and other authors that we worked with, but I can say that you're going to find that those 10,000 plus launches, it's easier to do when it's given away free than it is paid. If you're doing paid, you're probably going to want to look into heavy pre-order campaigns. And we're doing one with Ashley Moria right now, who wrote Running Lean. And the goal here for us is Wall Street Journal and New York Times bestseller. So we're doing a series of pre-order campaigns. He's already been doing them. We're going to be doing it for the next 6 months up until launch. And the goal is if we can get like 5,000 to 10,000 pre-orders, we're sitting pretty well when the actual launch comes. So it's just different. It's just different strategies. Depends what your goal is. Comes down to that.
I think it's also the budget, the size of your audience, the amount of money that's on the line. I remember talking to Lewis Howes about his book launch about 6 months before he launched his book, and the stuff. I think he just put a podcast out about it recently, actually, but it was in a mastermind at Tropical Think Tank, and the stuff he was doing, like, it was so full on, like selling 5,000 copies at a time, and only doing interviews with people that could buy 500 copies of the book, and like just stuff that I would think, whoa, like that is the scale of that is just crazy. But that's kind of it's exactly the same thing, just at a different scale. When you get a lot of money to spend on something and it's going to be a really big thing and you've got a big team around it, then you do the same things, but on a much bigger scale.
Yep. Yeah. So there's a lot of variables. But I think if you're bootstrapping something, that's going to kind of dictate. And I'll say this, if you're still coming back to the goal too, if you're bootstrapping, you're not necessarily well known, you don't have a platform, doing a free book launch is a great way to get the book out into the hands of people. And if it's good, like the 7-day startup is a great example of it. It's good, it'll spread. And then that's where the consistent promotion comes in.
Kerwin, what's up?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good,
man. How are you?
Excellent. So great to actually visually see you guys here. Tom, I'm following your Dan. I read your 7-day stuff, and I'm doing the challenge, of course. And Tom, I signed up for your free course that you have, and it's actually quite good.
I hope so.
I'm about step 8 right now. I wrote the book like 4 years ago, and now I'm go back and I'm like, oh, a lot of things have changed. So I have to do a lot of edits now. So what I've started to do is starting to build a tribe and kind of like sharing some of the chapters with people so they'll sign up for the list. And that's been good. I think I have about 80-something people on the list so far. And I had the Facebook group set up. I did a Facebook page. So I'm trying to drum up stuff around that. But I really want to do. I think I want to do a paper book, because a lot of the readers, they're older and they want something to hold in their hands. So is CreateSpace the best way to do that?
Again, there's going to be variables. I find CreateSpace, these are both, if I'm not mistaken, both these are CreateSpace prints. And if you've picked up the Sunday Startup or Content Machine, you'll see that there's no discernible difference between this and a traditionally published book, unless you're somebody who like really pays attention to like really small stuff. But otherwise, the average consumer, the average reader is going to have no idea. So I say that CreateSpace is super easy to use. They're a subsidiary of Amazon. And it's super cheap. Once you upload your files, you can get a book printed for like $4 or $5 USD basically, depending on the size, of course, and how many images. But it's super cheap. So I recommend CreateSpace. I think it's a great way to get a paperback.
All right, cool. I'll definitely try.
And print on demand too, so you don't have to order 1,000 of them. People order them, they print them, they send them out. It works really well. And
they do the whole fulfillment through Amazon. So if that's the beauty. Again, one of the great reasons to use Amazon is you don't have to distribute any of that. That's kind of incredible to think about. But you can get a paperback copy to somebody without ever having to pay for warehousing or fulfillment or shipping or tracking.
Okay.
Amazon does all that, and you still get a decent margin.
Great. So, I've seen people saying that they've made the New York Times bestseller list, but what is that based on? Is that, it's clearly different from the Amazon bestseller list, but what's the criteria around that?
It's for the criteria around Amazon bestseller?
No, New York Times.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. So I was going to say, Amazon is a little like, depends what you can get bestseller on categories, you get bestseller overall. But in New York Times or Wall Street Journal, or then there's others like USA Today and a bunch of others. I don't want to go too in depth because it's like quite a complex process, but I will say that they each, like New York Times and Wall Street Journal, they kind of independently track their own sales. And there's also, and what they only track individual sales. They don't track, or they say they don't track bulk book orders. So there's people that have tried to buy their way onto these lists you may have heard of. And what they'll do is they'll buy their own book. They'll put like $100,000 or $200,000 into buying their own book in bulk, in like 5,000 packs and stuff like that, or 10,000 packs. And usually, we don't know. It's like Amazon's algorithm, how New York Times actually handles it. But from the way what they've written about and shared, they say that they do not allow that. So they only track individual book orders, and they have their own system for how they do that, but they do it through bookstores. And so they're counting. They basically, generally speaking, they find out what bookstores in the continental United States are selling the book. So here's the deal: if you want to be a Wall Street Journal and New York Times bestseller, you need to sell in the U.S.
And you got to get in the bookstore,
Canada or Mexico or anywhere else in the world actually counts. It's unfortunate, but that's what they count. So that's another thing to keep in mind, strategy-wise, like depending on what you want.
Very cool. All right, man. Thanks a lot. I'm chugging away.
Thank you for the questions.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, guys.
If anyone else wants to ring in, we've got a free seat. Otherwise, there's a question about Audible. Interesting question, which is something I'm thinking about. When to consider doing an audio book?
I think do the audiobook as soon as possible. I know you introduced me, I think, to Matt Paulson, right? So you're buddies with Matt Paulson. And he was telling me that what's interesting is his book, we did Email Marketing Demystified. And what was interesting is his Audible book has done way better than the book itself. So you don't know how these things are going to pan out. I don't know if that's going to be the case for everybody, but your Audible book is also you can charge what, $20, $30 or probably $30 for it or something like that. So your margin is going to be higher too. So I say, if you have I would encourage you, if you have the resources and time, create the Audible book or pay for somebody to record it for you or whatever and get an Audible book out there. It doesn't have to be ready on launch, but get it out there.
Yeah, that's on my list to do. I asked James Altucher this question on one of the AMAs that he did on Reddit or somewhere like that. And he said, I think he's got 13 books out there, and he said, do the audiobook every time because he makes quite a bit of money from the audiobook. A lot of people like it. So I believe him, given the amount of experience he's got in books. Jose, what's up?
Jose,
hey,
what's up?
Me again. Hello again. One very quick question. When do you pivot from free to charge?
So this is one of those things where it depends. If this is like, if you've been in like self-publishing circles, people talk a lot about this, like with in Amazon in particular. You're asking, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so for those who might not be familiar, Amazon, if you want your book to be exclusive through Amazon, as in you can't sell it through another platform, you can do a free giveaway of the book on Amazon. And then it's exclusive to Amazon for 90 days. Okay, so there's pros and cons to that. If you do it, you can have up to 5 days free, or you can do like 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or 5 days free, but you can have up to 5 days free within that 90-day period. Or you can alternatively do a discount thing, but I won't get into that. So just using the free thing as an example, some people have argued or said that if you want to do free for a couple days, and you want to get your momentum going up in the free categories, so when you transition to paid, it's going to be helpful. Well, here's the newsflash. Amazon even says this in their documentation if you read it. The free list is different than the paid categories. There's no crossover. There's no influence. So the free, it doesn't matter how well you do in free, it is not going to cross over to paid. All that matters in paid, is people actually buying it. Where you see any type of correlation between trending up the charts is that you're obviously sending traffic then to that sales page. And so when it goes from free to paid, you're going to end up getting people to buy it, right? Because there's a ton of traffic coming. Even if they're coming from links that say the book is free, it's not free anymore, but it's $3 or $4. I'm going to buy it. And that's where it can be helpful. But then if you wanted to be strategic about that, you're almost kind of being tricky. You're like, we'll get a huge blast and then we'll switch it to paid. So I don't even think that way. I say to myself, let's dominate. If we're going to do free, let's dominate free and just be a bestseller and get as high in Amazon as possible. And then when we get to paid, different strategy, different promotion. So get ready to re-promote at either the discount price or whatever the actual price is.
Now, at that point, would it be helpful if you're going to charge to supplement it with like a special section or something expanded to enhance the value of it? Or is the book pretty much done, hard to change?
Okay, so that's kind of two questions. So one about the books changing. In Amazon, super easy. You just upload a new file. I think you've done this, Dan, a couple times maybe. So it's like if you notice like a typo after the fact, which everybody has typos, you can upload a file like that in Amazon, and it's usually ready in 12 to 24 hours. So if you wanted to add an extended section to it, you could. I would say that would be a little confusing, and I would say probably avoid that right away, because then if I got the book for free and then I find out it's selling, but there's this like a different version, I don't know if it sends the right message. So I would say instead of doing that, maybe say if you purchase the book for whatever the price is, here are a bunch of extra downloads. You just have to send me your receipt, and here are bonuses you get. So now if that extended stuff, instead of it being in the book, make those bonuses outside of the book that people get if they purchase your book and send you a receipt. That's one way to do it. There's a lot of ways to do it, but that's probably makes more sense and will generate more interest.
Sort of like the resources page on the 7-Day Startup. Yeah,
and in Dan's case, Dan just did that totally free, which is just a value upgrade to his book. It just makes the book even more worthwhile. But Dan, did you ever have anything behind a subscriber wall at all? No. So Dan's also just defies convention too. But yeah,
like you do stuff away for free.
He makes beer for a living and lives on the beach.
I know, exactly.
I'm trying not to hate you, Dan. Trying not to hate you.
All right. Thanks for the question, Jose.
Awesome, Jose. Appreciate it.
I like this one about the title. Do you have any thoughts on that from Kim? I've just put that up on the screen.
Yeah. So I learned this from Eben Pagan, and he's a big fan of like alliteration. So, and it's interesting. People will remember alliteration and repeated like first syllables, basically. So that's one thing you can kind of think about. And there's probably plenty of examples of those. I can't think off the top of my head. But also, at the end of the day, it's like there's two ways to think about that question. You can think about it from like an SEO internet marketer perspective, and you can say, what are the words that people type or type the most? And let's create a title like that. Or you can think about, depending on what you care about, you can think about maybe being more of a personal platform type book, something you're going to sell at conferences when you speak, sell at events, maybe sell to schools. And you're going to want it to have just a professional title, but also kind of be branding. So I don't know if Dan did, I don't think you did this on purpose, but you came up with a very great brand with this title. So I don't know if you just stumbled upon it, Dan, or I'm curious how you came up with the idea for this title too. We're just like,
yeah, no,
that's how long it took me.
Yeah, no, with all the stuff I do, I'm always thinking about the brand. So with that book, with Content Machine, I never know what's going to happen. You know, it might turn into, I'm quite confident that any of those books could turn into a business. I could build a business out of the Content Machine brand because it's a well-known brand. People talk about it. I've got a domain, contentmachine.com, which is a nice domain. I don't want to build a business out of it right now, but I do want to have a brand that I can use and I can own down the track. And so I don't think about SEO. I think about what you can build into a brand. Someone in the comments has said Tim Ferriss talked about using AdWords to get titles, which is another way you can do it. Just work out what people click on more, which is another way you can do it again. But to me, again, it's about the brand. Like if you're writing a book with the intention to build a business around it, then choose something that works well as a book title, but can also be short and sharp, something that people can talk about, fits into a sentence like a normal brand, something that looks good, sounds good, has a good domain. And then the opportunities are endless for what you can do with it after you bring the book out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So, and then one thing I would say about subtitles though is make sure your subtitles, title, I'm a big fan of what Dan just said. If you're thinking in terms of like what people search and stuff like that, that's where the subtitle come in handy. And you want to think in terms of, you know, what maybe keywords or phrases. You don't want to go totally off the cuff. You don't want to have a confusing tag or a tagline or subtitle. That doesn't benefit anybody. That's to clarify what maybe a confusing title could be, but it's kind of more of a branding title. The subtitle can make up for that.
Yeah,
cool.
I think just general title writing, sort of copywriting skills comes into this as well. Like when you write a piece of content, you don't just write a headline, which is this is what the content's about. You have to think about like what's going to get people's attention, what's going to be short and sharp, what's going to make them read the next part of the post. So all of that stuff comes into when you're naming anything.
Yep. So let's see, Rob. Rob is an awesome dude. If you guys don't know him, he's a boss and he's great at product hunt. So, so Rob asks, have you ever seen any issues with reviews being taken down? I know I've heard of reviews being removed if they think they're connected with you or using secret criteria. Yeah, I think my reviews anytime I've reviewed any Dan's books, they get taken down, but I still try. So yeah, it happens, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can challenge it. Let me put it that way. You can challenge it. You can always email them. And I did that when I first, when you build up an audience, Amazon, yeah, they have something in there where they can tell like you're either easy as last names. So like families usually can't, and there's nothing you can do about that. But say you actually have an audience of people who read from you, like a blog or a newsletter, and you send people to your book on Amazon. I've seen it personally. We've experienced this with authors where those reviews, which are totally substantial, those are just fans. They're not related by blood. They're not friends. They're just fans. Have had their reviews taken down. And all I say is I tell the reviewer, again, this is why it's so crucial to know these people. If you do, these ambassadors, these early notification list people, have a way to get in contact with them and ask them to challenge Amazon on it. There's a way to email them through support, and then they have to do some kind of validation to explain themselves, but they have no obligation to add it. So, yeah.
Yep, makes sense. I've just accepted a call in, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. So if that doesn't work, we'll take another one.
Cool.
Kind of answered this one. Digital first before paperback. I sort of tried to answer that in the comments, but do you have any thoughts on that?
I do them at the same time. I would not separate them. You look more professional if you have both paperback and digital going at the same time. And it's, again, the actual intensity of like having one or the other, just doing digital, it's actually not that much harder to just add on a print copy. Like the technology is there, super simple. In some ways it's easier to format a book for print. So I just do both. I always do both anytime I work with anybody.
Yeah, I like this question from Liam as well. I don't know if it came up over on the left, but can you see that one?
I can. Why would someone sell via Gumroad versus Amazon?
Yeah.
So here's the question, guys. Why would someone sell via Gumroad versus Amazon? Any experience with your clients on why they might want to use Gumroad for the ebook? So what's interesting is so Gumroad, for those who aren't familiar, Gumroad is just a platform for you to very easily sell digital or physical products to your audience, directly to your audience. So you can upload a ebook, get a link, share it on Facebook, somebody click it and buy. And it's outside the Amazon ecosystem. The pros of Gumroad is you get like 95%, give or take, of the revenue. Whereas Amazon, you're only getting 30 to 70%, give or take. So I'm actually doing this for my new book, product placement. For Collaborate, I'm actually not going to be selling through Amazon. This is a nice hardcover, dust jacket, and everything like that. So the reality is, and the reason I'm doing that is because, and this kind of, I hope gets to the point, is I look at this, and even when I give advice to a client or an author that we're working with, depending on what their goal is. So if you're going for reach, I think Amazon is a great platform for exposure and for reach. If you're going for revenue, if you're going for money, I don't think Amazon necessarily is so great if you have your own platform. So there's some stipulations there. So with my book, I know it's going to be niche, but I already have a pretty large newsletter. I'm able to get the word out about my book and stuff like that. I'm not worried about not getting traffic for it. And I know I can garner a lot of interest. So I don't need exposure for this book. What I want from it is I want to be able to generate revenue from it. I want it to be worth my while to promote this book and share it. So I'm going to sell directly from my audience. I'm going to sell through Gumroad, a hardcover book. So it's different, different strokes for different folks, but ultimately, like, really hone in on what is the goal. And you might find that Amazon might not be right for you, even though the standard comparison is like, we always look at Amazon books on Amazon and stuff like that. But there are downsides to Amazon. As good as it can be, there can be downsides. Like you basically must sell your digital book for between $2 or $3 and $10. Otherwise, they're going to take 70% of the revenue. So if you want to sell an ebook for $20, you're kind of out of luck on Amazon. People aren't going to take you seriously on that platform. You sell on your own platform, a $20 ebook is not uncommon. I mean, I paid $50, hundreds of dollars on ebooks on people's platforms. And that's because they're selling it outside of the Amazon ecosystem where the prices are kind of forced. So those are just food for thought.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. A 7-Day Startup's not a bad example of that because when I wrote it, I wasn't at all interested in focusing on the 7-Day Startup thing as its own business. It was more like just get it out there, get it into as many hands as possible. But now that I've got a membership and then I'm monetizing this business in its own right, my goals have changed a little bit. So I'm starting to think about, do I only want to do it on Amazon now, or do I do it on my site and therefore get the people into my funnel so I can get them onto the challenge and sell them memberships and all that kind of stuff. So that's a big thing you can do when you sell it yourself.
Yep. And a couple of follow-on questions to this, I think, why not both platforms? Again, there's maybe nothing wrong with doing both platforms, but you want to think, what's the purpose? So if my purpose is exposure, broad reach exposure and awareness, then there's no really reason to sell it through Gumroad and Amazon. You might as well just sell through Amazon. Like I'm a big proponent of 80-20 principle. It's also one of the reasons why, by the way, I haven't really mentioned Barnes & Noble in this conversation. I know you can sell books there, but I just don't understand why you would when I can get like 95% of my sales can come from Amazon and 5% come from these other platforms. Why would I split that? And what happens is if I can funnel it into one position, what you're doing is you're feeding this funnel into one direction, to one source, to one conversion place, Amazon or Gumroad or whatever it is. But if you have multiple different things, it's like you're splitting sales, which means that's going to affect your rank on these different platforms. You can do it. I just don't see the point. I think I'm an 80-20 principle kind of person. That's how I think. And I say, what's the least amount of effort for the biggest reward? And so that's why I like to pinpoint a single platform, know what my goal is, and then make sure like that the launch is actually thought out that way, or not even post-launch too, that the sales funnel is thought out that way. So hope that answers it.
Liam asked one follow-up question, which is a good one. With your book, because I noticed you got the hardcover thing going on, is that wouldn't be CreateSpace? You've actually just had to order a shitload of those?
Yeah, so I can do, what's interesting is CreateSpace will actually do print-on-demand hardcovers. This is Blurb, which I'm not saying I'm the biggest fan of right now because they gave me some issues with my ISBN stuff. So, but Blurb, you can do hardcover through Blurb. You can do hardcover through CreateSpace. If you do CreateSpace, it's basically hidden though, and you have to pay to upload, and you have to do some things that are different than their paperback. So their paperback is very simple. Hardcover is a little more secret, and then Ingram Sparks and Lightning Source are great for hardcovers as well. Ultimately, the question. So what I'm doing is I'm going to do print on demand because I do not want a warehouse. My option is I can warehouse. I can choose to do an offset print run if I want to get over 1,000. More worth your time if you're going to do about 5,000 when you're starting to do offset. That's what really makes sense in terms of scale. Yeah. But then you have to warehouse that stuff. So with John Lee Dumas for the Freedom Journal, gosh, product placement all over the place, guys. The Freedom Journal. So this thing is hardcover, but they printed in China. They shipped it over. They shipped over like 20,000, and they're going to use Amazon's warehousing and distribution, FBA, I think it's called. And so then you can actually buy the hardcover directly from Amazon. But that's like a whole different kind of level. If you're, depending on where you're at, like if that's what you're going for, you can do it. And it's not the hardest thing in the world. But for those of us that might be bootstrapping or have smaller platforms, I'm going to do print on demand, hardcover, and I'm going to ship. I'm going to sell through Gumroad, and then I'm going to have to manually ship these out. But I have an assistant, and that's what a team is for, to fulfill those type of orders. And a VA can do that kind of stuff very, very easily. So that's how we're going to fulfill that stuff.
And then you get the benefit. I mean, if you do have a funnel at the back end, you get the benefit of being able to sell these guys other stuff, which can be a huge benefit.
Yep. I mean, at the end of the day, like, and that I personally, I know on the back end for me is we have more expensive products and services that if even one person ends up, paying for something like that, then it more than makes up for whatever cost of shipping I have, right? So it's just calculated risk, and that's kind of depends on your personal situation, to be honest. Somebody asked, when's Collaborate's publication date? If you go to tommorkes.com/collaborate, you can sign up. It's actually going live this week as part of the 7-Day Startup Challenge.
Very cool. I'll put a link in there as well. We'll take a couple more questions. Have you still got time to take a couple more?
Yeah, I think this is the last thing I had tonight. So after this, it's just, I guess go drink or something like that.
Best follow. This is a good question. So this is about follow-up tactics after you launch.
Cool. So post-launch, so Stephen asks, hey, Stephen, what's up? Post-launch seems important to me to keep momentum and income going. Posting training in the back of the book is resource one tactic. What's been your best follow-up tactic? So the follow-up tactic it kind of actually ties into the launch, and it's ambassador group. Do you have people that are like actively promoting this? And you can't do that forever. It's not like you're cracking the whip of your fans and saying promote this, promote this, promote. They'll get burned out. Don't do that. But if you get people energized and invigorated about a book, that's the book that's going to come up, especially if it's a niche book. That's the book that's going to come up in conversation when that topic is brought up, right? So if somebody's talking about how do I build a startup, here's the 7-Day Startup. It's only going to take you 7 days. This is probably a good book to read, and it's going to come to mind. But you were able to get that book into the conversation by getting people, or basically instigating them to write reviews and share it and stuff like that. So that's number one. 2, the influencers. If you can get on these podcasts, that creates organic traffic to your website. That's going to keep coming. Because if you get featured, I think, Dan, I'm trying to think of the big ones you got. Did you get on Art of Charm?
No, I actually didn't get on too many really big podcasts. I got on Rob's podcast, Startups for the Rest of Us. I did Tropical MBA. I've been on some. I've been on Pat Flynn and
there you go.
Mixergy since the launch, but not before the launch.
So there you go.
All of this stuff helps with credibility to get on shows like that.
Exactly, and that's a good point, though. I think that's important to bring up because it didn't happen before the launch. It doesn't have to happen before launch, but leveraging that launch and the successful book and kind of everything else you're doing with your platform to get into these other spaces. Mixergy and Pat Flynn, I'm sure those two drove a lot of traffic. I would assume. I'm just guessing. Yeah, and that's how you generate. That's how you create consistent momentum, and that's why Dan's. I mean, minus the launch, which was like 10,000 or something like that. That's 20,000 plus books in the last year. That's momentum. And I'd be curious if you did anything else, Dan, besides kind of podcasts. You're obviously sharing it when you started the community. That was a big one, right? Starting the Facebook group.
Yeah, the Facebook group. I've also done a lot of content and the community. I did a fair bit of public speaking. The public speaking is actually kind of surprising. People like to see you in person. So, I've definitely sold a lot of books around the public speaking engagements, and I've done some bulk orders. I'm just doing one at the moment where a mob that sends out entrepreneurial like kits to people, and they've just bought 40 copies to include the 7-Day Startup in the kit. So that kind of stuff kind of comes up and just keeps going. So all those kind of opportunities to get involved. There's also been launches that companies, like what's the name of the book, the dollar book one. I've forgotten the name. But there's like those kind of launches where it's like you don't have to do much, but you can reduce the price of your book and be associated with a whole bunch buck books. Amazon also do them.
Discount book launches.
Yep. Amazon also do them. They just randomly reach out and say, we're doing a promotion in Brazil. Do you want to be included in it? You just write back and say yes, and that sends it on further. So you just kind of keep saying yes to all these things.
Yeah. And then somebody said your Facebook group rocks. I'd say I'm part of it too, and it's the best Facebook group I think I've ever been a part of, man. It's testament to Dan and to the platform he's built, and to being able to generate those consistent sales going forward, because you're like, okay, he's engaged. He's not this guy that's like behind a curtain or something like that, or you can't get access to, speaks through a microphone. He's personable. And I think that is a big driver of sales too. I think a lot of authors think they can write it and then go away. That doesn't sell books. You have to engage. You have to have that conversation brought up. You have to keep the conversation going. And that's kind of on you as the author.
Yeah, and I think it also comes back to branding too. We talked about branding before. Like I mentioned the word 7-Day Startup a lot because I got the group and 7-Day Startup Pro community. I've got the challenge. I got the book. I got the video course, and I just find myself talking about it a lot. And when you use those words, people might forget what you say after it, but they'll remember that 7-Day Startup word. They'll go and Google it. They'll look on Amazon, and just naturally they'll hear it on a podcast and they'll go and buy the book. So if you've got a brand that people can really easily remember and it explains what you do, then it's just going to naturally lead to more sales.
Yep. What else we got? Got a lot of good questions. I like the engagement here.
Thanks, Liam. Liam just said he spends all day approving members into the 7-Day Startup Facebook group.
Nice.
Well, this is an interesting question from Kiss for Catherine. Interesting account name there. Do you see book sales as part of the income funnel or more as a part of the sales funnel for another product or service?
I think probably primarily it's going to be part of the sales funnel for another product or service, because a book by itself it's one of those. It's just a lower priced offering, generally speaking. But that said, there are plenty of people. Nathan Barry is a great example. I don't know if you know Nathan, Dan. Yeah, and he's doing ConvertKit now and blowing that up. But I mean, his book Authority, and he did
Designer's Handbook, App Designer's Handbook.
App Designer, yep. Yeah. And he shares his figures, and I think he's done close to $1 million through book sales through his own platform, through Gumroad. So again, coming back to that question, when you use Gumroad, when do you use Amazon? There's an example of a person who built up a great platform, a great audience of people who followed him, didn't need to use Amazon. He eventually released his book on Amazon. And I actually don't know why he did that, but again, probably just because it was just another avenue at that point. But I say that because of the way he structured his books, he did this tiered package system where he offered basically 3 variations of his book: the book plus some bonuses like an audio book or something like that, and some case studies, and then a book plus video interviews and templates and blah, 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 blah. And so all of a sudden his base level is like $50 or something like that. His middle tier is like 150, and his top tier is like 200 or $300. And now all of a sudden it's much more than a book, when in reality, that same content probably could have all been packaged into a book and sold on Amazon for $10. But again, why do that? So it just depends what your goals are, what you're going for. So think about that as you structure the book and what you're putting into it. So
I was kind of surprised. That's another question I asked James Altucher on his AMA, because I thought I actually do make reasonable money from book sales. I think last year, if I look at book sales and translations, I think I made about $30,000 maybe more, which is not too bad mostly from one book. But it was 2 books, I guess, with Content Machine, but mostly from 7-Day Startup. And Altucher said that he makes good money from his books. He said the key was to write more of them, to leverage your author status on Amazon, and do audiobooks. That were his 2 biggest tips for generating more revenue from the product themselves. And he's got 13 books and obviously must make pretty good money from it.
Yeah, and I think audiobooks, come back to that topic, it's like the concept of repurposing, right? Repurposing content for like content marketing purposes. It's like you have this great blog post or you have this great podcast. What other uses can you use for it to drive more traffic? I think audiobooks is a great example of just repurpose the content you already have first before you go off and write another book. Like leverage, I'm a big proponent of leverage the hell out of what you have right now until everybody is sick of hearing it. That'll take a long time, but leverage the heck out of it. Put it in any kind of format you can, if it's relevant like that, to get it out there. if that makes sense. So I think audiobook is a great combination. It's a great way to get it out there. But yeah, I don't know if you could do a video course, might as well. If you have a great book that's picking up steam, might as well do a video course or something like that, or e-course or something like that in addition, because you could ride that wave.
Yep. Excellent. All right. Well, that's an hour. So thank you so much for your time. That's been a really, really informative conversation. What's the best way for people to reach out to you if they're interested? There's been people in the comments saying they want to work with you on their book and all sorts of stuff. So what's the best place to get you?
This might be the best blab ever. I just typed in tommorkes.com, so you guys can check it out. And from there, I run Insurgent Publishing and a bunch of other things, but that's the hub. So you guys can get in contact with me right from there. Whether you want to work with me or just check out my free stuff, there's a lot of it. And yeah, happy to share. I appreciate you guys. All the great, man, this is awesome. This is a really good engagement. And I like this little map that Blab has set up here. That's cool.
Yeah, it's very good. Awesome. Okay, well, we'll leave it there. If I can get the 14 steps off you as well, I'll throw them in the Facebook group so people can check those out. And I'll let you guys know when the recording's up. It should be up soon. So thank you so much.
Yes, sir. It's my pleasure. And let me get you these steps. I'm going to paste them in here. See if there we go. Does that work? That's kind of. I can send it offline too if you want, and we can get you all those notes.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right. Have a good night. Enjoy drinking beer.
Take care. Bye, guys.
All right. See you guys. Have a good day.